One of the senators behind the cut, cap, and balance bill is calling Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid's move to block that bill from even getting to a vote in the Senate, quote, shameful, despicable, and an abuse of the chamber. Senator Mike Lee, a Republican from Utah, joins us now to explain. Senator, welcome. Great to have you today.
Thank you. Good to be with you.
Some strong words.
Yes, strong words for an important moment. A moment at which we're less than 10 days away from this impending deadline that Americans are understandably very concerned about. We had legislation that was moving through the Congress that had been passed out of the House of Representatives with bipartisan support. 5 Democrats joining Republicans to grant the president the exact debt limit increase that he wanted. And Senator Reid in the Senate wouldn't allow it to move forward, wouldn't even allow debate, discussion, or an amendment process, much less an up or down vote.
Well, there's some pretty significant strings attached to getting that debt limit increase, including a balanced budget amendment, which a lot of people have called for. Let's talk a little bit about some Fox News polling that we had recently on this. It said in general, 72% of those polled say they favor something along those lines, a balanced budget amendment. But when you talk about how to get to that, either through program cuts or tax hikes, those numbers flip and people are a lot less likely to go for it. How in the world do we get to some kind of compromise when people say they like the idea of balancing the budget, but they don't like the ideas of how you get there?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's exactly why I wrote my book, The Freedom Agenda, that explains some of these points. It explains that because Americans don't always agree in advance how we're going to balance the budget, we need to get them behind the point that they overwhelmingly agree on, which is that we're going to balance it, and we need to put that mandate in the Constitution so that each Congress can be bound by that same set of rules. We may not agree in advance how we're going to balance it, but because we agree that it does need to be balanced, we've got to start that process right now.
All right, you obviously, you're a lawyer, you're educated in that field. You've had a dynamic background, including clerking at the Supreme Court. So I have to ask you a question, constitutional nature, and comes off of what your book you've written as well. This idea that the 14th Amendment provides some room, possibly, for the president to override what's happening if we get to a debt ceiling without a limit, without a solution to where we're going. Secretary Geithner, Secretary of the Treasury, has talked about this. He's read the 14th Amendment aloud at a press conference and went on to say, as part of a negotiating strategy, you can't say if things don't go my way, I'm going to force the U.S. to default, not pay the legacy of bills accumulated by predecessors in Congress. It's not a credible negotiating strategy and it's not going to happen. Where do you stand on this idea that the 14th Amendment may give the president some pass or some way out?
Secretary Geithner is mistaken. Section 4 of the 14th Amendment reads in pertinent part to the effect that the debt of the United States, as authorized by law, shall be held inviolate. What that means is that not that the Secretary of the Treasury or the President can unilaterally raise the debt limit, but because it refers to the term authorized by law, as authorized by law, that's referencing Congress's power pursuant to Article 1, Section 8, Clause 2 of the Constitution, to incur debt in the name of the United States. Once that's been authorized, it has to be honored. So what that actually says is that we may not default. It would be unconstitutional for this Treasury Secretary to allow a default. Fortunately, we don't have to default, and that's why it's irresponsible for the Treasury Secretary to suggest otherwise. We've got $200 billion a month coming in the door. Less than 10% of that covers our debt service obligations. That's what the 14th Amendment requires.
So the use of the word default, is it semantics, is it a scare tactic, or is it legitimate?
I think it's an unfortunate semantic coincidence or an abuse of words, depending on your viewpoint, to refer to a failure to raise the debt limit as a default. A default, properly understood, in my opinion, refers to what would happen if we stopped making our debt payments. We've got more than enough to make our debt payments. So we ought to call failure to raise the debt limit by August 2nd something else. It would be bad, to be sure, but it's not a default.
I very quickly want to ask you, because you are a member of the Senate Tea Party caucus, how do you respond to criticism that members of the Tea Party, whether it's the Senate or the House, are the ones who are making it impossible to come to a compromise because they won't bend on issues like revenue?
I couldn't disagree more, and the facts bear me up on that disagreement. Look, it's the Senate Tea Party caucus and our counterparts in the House of Representatives who, quite ironically, are the ones who drafted the legislation that actually passed the House of Representatives that authorized the debt limit increase, the very size that the president is seeking. We were ready to support it in the Senate to help get it passed. So it's very ironic and absolutely untruthful for some people to be suggesting that somehow it's the Tea Party members of Congress that are blocking it, because right now the only deal that's actually been proposed and has garnered significant support in Congress and from outside groups was backed by Tea Party Republicans.
All right, Senator Mike Lee, always great to see you. We know you're busy. Thanks for making time for us.
Thank you.